I survived a plane crash, which is why I wear my mortality with pride. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a minute, I've come here to be entertained. I don't want to be thinking about my mortality, thanks very much. And yes, I understand that. And the word mortality does have bad press because it's normally associated with the word death. But if we spin that on its head and realize that our mortality is all about living life until our death, that changes it. And wearing my mortality with pride, it's kind of set me free to make the best of the time that's given to me. And that's made me a happier person, and happier people, they create happier relationships, and that spreads out to create a happier world. And I'm sure you're going to agree with me. My God, we need this right now. Well, the plane crash happened when I was 37, and it was on a glorious August early evening, and I was flying in a two-seater Cessna piloted by a friend when we hit an air bump and the propeller stopped going round. I thought my friend was goosing me, and then I saw the blood drain from his face, and I thought, oh my God, he's not. And then he started sending out a mayday call, and then he started jettisoning the fuel from the tanks. And he then started banking the plane and kind of heading for this field. And I could see there was a row of trees, tall trees, that we had to hop over before we could land in the tree. And we were coming down really fast. And I thought, oh my God, we're not going to make it. This is it. Oh my God, this is it. And in my head, I started saying goodbye to my family, my children, everybody I knew. And I just thought, please, God, let this be quick. Please don't let it hurt. And then there was this jolt as the wheels of the plane caught in the tops of the trees, and it kind of span us round, and we just sort of splattered onto the ground in the field. And the shards of glass from the windscreen just cascaded onto my lap, and my friend then yelled, get out, the plane's going to blow up. And it was like, oh my God, and I threw myself out of the sort of crumpled door. And then I don't know how this happened, but neither of us were physically hurt. But sitting beside the wreckage of that plane, I just felt emotionally flayed alive, because I suddenly saw that the London high life I was living was a sham, and that if I didn't do something to change my life, it would have been better to have died in the crash. Yeah, that was a big realization. And then I suddenly realized that, it's funny, but when we start coming back into alignment with who we truly are, it feels like the universe starts smiling at us, because that's when the right kind of people started turning up in my life to help me. And one of them gave me an article about the work of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she was the first psychiatrist to really acknowledge the spiritual needs of the dying. And in this article was information about her life, death, and transition workshops, and her famous words, if you can't live, you can't die. And if you can't die, you can't live. Well, those just spoke through my heart to my soul. And I knew I had to go and do one of those workshops. I didn't have any money at the time, so I sold my grandmother's diamond ring that I'd inherited. And I invested that money into signing up for one of the workshops and buying a plane ticket to the West Coast of America. Well, this week-long workshop was incredibly cathartic and raw and exposing, but it just catapulted me onto this journey to start understanding how I could wear my mortality with pride. And my journey culminated in doing an MA in the Rhetoric and Rituals of Death at King Alfred's, Winchester, where a lovely tutor introduced me to Dr. Peter Fenwick. And Peter is he's a neuropsychiatrist, and he's a world-leading expert on near-death experiences. And he invited me to become his honorary researcher into an end-of-life experience research study that he was leading, which was going to look at the transpersonal nature of what happens during the dying process. Well, my heart just burst open listening to palliative care doctors and nurses and relatives and care workers talking about how sometimes there was a sort of a spiritual feeling towards the dying process, which was kind of associated with the higher level of love. And it was this love, or this spiritual experience, that was helping the dying to say their farewells and to let go. And I'm sure some of you will relate to this actually, but how some of the people who I was interviewing were talking about how sitting beside the dying turned into a kind of life-changing experience, because it reminded them of the precious transitory nature of our mortality. Well, this study inspired me to join the Death Cafe movement, which was set up in the UK by John Underwood in 2011. And John was a wonderful man and a real visionary, and he was also a Buddhist. And he just felt it was his mission to really challenge the taboo that surrounds the way we talk, or we don't talk rather, about death and dying and mortality in our society. And for anybody who's not been to a death cafe, they provide a free, confidential space for all of us, any of us who want to come and talk about end of life, death and dying and mortality. And I'm constantly moved by the courage, the honesty, the integrity of people who come to these death cafes and speak about their loss and grief, and about the core of what it means for all of us to be on this human journey. And this kind of fills me with awe for the human condition, the tenacity of the human spirit. Lots of people go through really horrendous losses and grief, but come out the other side wanting to help and support other people going through similar situations. And it's made me come to an understanding that our loss and grief have to be part of the human condition, because they remind us of our humanity and of our compassion for each other. And for me, that's what gives our experience of mortality depth, meaning, and purpose. And this is why I like spending time thinking about my mortality. For me, it's as important as making my will or my lasting power of attorney. And I love having these two documents at home because they give me peace of mind. I know I'm not going to leave chaos behind for my family to have to clear up after my time comes, which it will. And thinking about my mortality, it's taught me that life is only an experience and we're just passing through, but it's how we relate to this experience that matters. And that's helped me to focus on what truly does matter, especially when I get sideswiped by some emotional drama that's little more than a storm in a teacup. And it's also helped me to stop comparing my life with anyone else's. This is my experience of mortality, which is totally unique to me. And that's made me understand that it's our mortality that connects us all together. All of us simultaneously are going through this experience of mortality, but in our own really individual ways. So, what happens when we deny our mortality? Well, I believe we trick ourselves into believing that we're immortal and invincible. But that makes us frightened of the natural cycles of life and death. So to push that fear down, we turn into maniacal consumers. But the more we consume, the more we grab hold of, the more we hoard to us, the more terrified we become of losing it or someone taking it from us. So we fight each other for supremacy. And that makes us behave as if we're separate and above the laws of nature. And look at the mess we're in. So, wearing your mortality with pride, I get it. It has to be personal choice. And if you do, I promise you, you do not need to be in a plane crash to start doing it. But you do at least need to acknowledge that your mortality is the nucleus of your human experience. And do you know something? I think this is one of the things that could turn our beleaguered world around, because wearing our mortality with pride, it puts us back in right relationship with ourselves, with each other, with our place in the world, but most importantly, it puts us back in right relationship with our relationship with life and death. And do you know something else? I think the universe is desperate for us to start doing this, which is why wearing your mortality with pride is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.